So let's move on to U.S.-China relations that you and I and many other Christians, we have been helping two countries and doing a lot of projects, exchange, help to understand, help to strengthening the relationship. Now it's totally different time. How do you see that looking back? One of the things that people are looking back at is very negative, and I'm not a negative, saying all the past, all 20 years we are doing totally wrong. I don't believe that. I think people change, time change, and some of the things we don't know, we do whatever we believe God is leading us. So how do you see back in the U.S.-China relationship in the past, current, and the future?
Sure. Okay, past-wise, as you and I have shared, I think that God brought us together for a reason. There are many things that you and I have done, both here in the United States and also in China, that has strengthened the churches that we serve,
people
and
to
the
people,
pastor, people to people, and so. In some respects, some things have changed. In other respects, nothing has changed. Okay. In respect to the fact that there are sinners on both sides, that hasn't changed. Okay. The fact that there are good people both in America and in China that love God and want to do God's will and have positive relationship between the two people groups, that has not changed. Yes, there have been some things governmentally that has changed and basically needed to change. If you remember that it was you and myself, and we had two other brothers with us, and Daniel was one, and we were in a hotel room outside Washington, and we were saying, what does God really want us to do? And we stayed up all night talking, and like you said, we want a people to people relationship built between Christians in the United States and Christians in China to come together as God's people, for the good of both nations. That's not changed. I think that's your thought and your heart. That's my thought and that's my heart, and our actions are going to follow. Now, what actions we take might be different than we've done in the past. How we serve might be different than in the past. And at the time, neither you nor I were aware of what is referred to as the 100-year marathon. Okay, and we're familiar with that.
Right.
And as I've stated about the U.S. government and the Chinese government, do not confuse the American people with the people who are in American government, and do not confuse the Chinese people who are, in China, with the Chinese leaders who are in Chinese government. Okay, that they're two distinct concepts, two distinct categories. Now, what we do know since you and I started is that there is a long history of the Communist Party seeking to first dominate the Chinese people, to abuse the Chinese people. There's a history there that you have people who are of Chinese heritage abusing other people of Chinese heritage, imprisoning, killing, forced organ donation. That is Chinese inflicting harm on Chinese. And we see that here in America as well, okay? And so there has been from the Chinese Communist Party, this vision of once China is, the people of China are subdued, that to expand the Chinese influence across the world, that between technology and economics and certain freedoms, sciences, we have seen the Communist Party grow and grow and grow in strength and power. And as you stated earlier, that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. We're seeing that in China. We're also seeing that here in New Mexico, that there were 6 Democrats who voted for pro-life in the last legislative session, and the Democrat progressive governor ran candidates against them in the primary and completely wiped out anybody in the Democrat Senate in New Mexico that's pro-life. We're seeing that kind of retaliation of people inside your own party. If they don't agree with you, you're gone. You're gone. And that's because of the naturalistic worldview, the materialistic worldview, and as opposed to having a biblical worldview. So we see it on both sides. So we are coming to a point in global history where the Communist Party in China, on the one hand, is gaining so much power that reach into other countries quietly through economics and politics and, education, that we're seeing this web that has been created by the Chinese Communist Party, not the rank and file Chinese people, but the Chinese Communist Party, for a global domination. We've not seen that before, and is far more expansive and far more powerful than Rome, than ancient China, than Greece, than all the empires that preceded. And the only thing that we can, based on rationality and logic, is the way that the Communist Party treats the people inside China, first of all at home, and then inside Hong Kong, and then in other areas where they have influence, that is the kind of governance that we are going to see across the world unless the Communist Party is stopped. And so there are people by the millions inside China that they want to see a righteous government replace the Chinese Communist government and to be a friendly neighbor to the world. There are those people there. You know them, I know them. And there are people in America that were born here or migrated here and became citizens here, that they are very concerned about the kind of communism that took hold of China. They are afraid of that same communism taking hold here in America and what that's going to do to the American people. So we're back to our where we started. It's worldview. What are you ultimately persuaded about the universe? And if it is a materialistic worldview, then there is no God, and you could do whatever you want with the human being in government, in economics, in healthcare, and education, and everything.
So you touched another topic that I want to ask you about, because before you went to U.S. Congress to become a congressman, you served as a pastor for 16 years in Santa Fe, and you see things differently from Christian perspective and from biblical worldview, even in the politics. Now, we know some of the Chinese immigrants, they become U.S. citizens, and they are Christians. They themselves, maybe in California, in New York, or their children maybe would like to, entering into politics so that their faith and their, the Christian perspective can influence society. Now, what kind of advice you would give to them? And also, especially when you mentioned about Matthew chapter 28, when Jesus was saying, all the powers in the heaven and on earth are given to me. We talked about the Great Commission many, many years, but we never talked about,
all
Jesus,
authority.
Yeah, the authority. So
Yes.
Could you share that with our audience?
Sure. Sure. As you know, that whenever I'm asked 10 questions, the answer to 9 of them is biblical worldview.
Yeah.
So I would give the same advice to a Christian who is here, they come from mainland China or anywhere in the world, that and you feel that God has that you have the gifts and the passion, to be engaged in the public square, in the political arena. Number one thing, okay, get grounded in a biblical worldview. Mm-hmm. Because I'll just tell you right now, there are too many in Congress and in the state houses and in elected government officials across this nation, judges on the bench, that they are Christian, they sing Amazing Grace, they go to church, they tithe, they do all, they got praise CDs they play in the car and Hallelujah Jesus at the stoplight and light the candles and go to mass and everything else. That all means nothing if the mind is not grounded in a biblical worldview. There are so many preachers that are not grounded in a biblical worldview. Church leaders, Sunday school teachers, elders, deacons, priests, cardinals and bishops in the Catholic Church that are not grounded in a biblical worldview. That before you do anything, medical doctor, politician, that you need to be grounded in a biblical worldview, because all authority in heaven and earth belongs to Christ. When I talk to pastors and they say, well, Mr. Redmond or Pastor Redmond or Brother Redmond, we can't be mixing religion and politics, and there's a separation of church and state, and that is a lie from the pit of hell. Okay, that is a lie from the pit of hell. And so I asked these pastors, I said, oh, well, what are you doing? They go, oh, well, we're saving souls, and it's like, oh, yeah, really? Well, by what authority do you save souls? Oh, Great Commission, and I go, well, where's it at? And he goes, well, Matthew 28. And then I asked the pastors, I go, well, exactly, Pastor, what does Jesus say right before go make disciples of all nations? Most pastors can't tell you. And I don't know where they went to Bible college or seminary. Most preachers I talk to, American, Chinese, Hispanic immigrants that I work with, Korean Christians that I work with, European Christians that I work with, I say, what did Jesus say right before he gave you the Great Commission? And they don't know. And I have to remind them. Jesus says, all authority in heaven and on earth is mine. Are you telling me that political authority is outside Christian thought? Are you telling me that marriage authority, education authority, medical authority, What authority is outside the lordship of Christ? The number one thing that if somebody that they're going to call themselves by the name of Christ, they're going to wear the name of Christ. And he indeed is the Lord of your life. He's the Lord of the whole universe. He's not Lord of the church universe. He's Lord of the whole universe. The church world is inside the whole universe. And so get grounded in a biblical worldview. You and I know we've been teaching side by side biblical worldview now, 20 years.
I know the Great Commission has been huge with the Chinese churches. So your first time I heard you saying, before Jesus announced Great Commission, he declares all the authority. I was shocked because I never realized that. And I was never taught by the Chinese churches. So when you're mentioning, because he has authority on the heaven and the earth, and understand the Christian testimonies and service and influence has to base upon that, Jesus declaration, so
absolutely
that is something eye-opening. And
Jesus is Lord of all creation, or he's not Lord at all.
Right.
He is Lord over all. There's not Christian truth and secular truth. No, there's truth. Jesus, when he said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, he didn't say, I am the truth of my way, or, it's all truth. And being, you and I spent most of our life, this is going to tell our age, that most of our life, we were born in the early 1950s, whoops, 50s, that in the 20th century, something that has been impregnated in the mind of every human being, influenced by Western civilization, including China being influenced by Western civilization, is the idea of the separation of faith and reason, the separation between head and heart, the separation between the holy and the sacred, and that Jesus is only Lord over my heart, my person, my belief, my feelings, and that if you want to have other feelings of whatever, that it's equally valid, that Jesus is only Lord for you, but not Lord for me. And that is not the biblical view. That worldview came to us primarily through three philosophers. It's Hume, Kant, and Hegel. And those are the three. The first two basically said, well, we're not sure God exists. So they opened up the door for materialism, among other things. And then Hegel, he followed them along, and he's the one that gave birth to Darwin, Freud, and Marx. Okay. Darwin, Freud, and Marx, those theories are built on top of Hegelian philosophy. And I find it, and you've seen me laugh before when we're in China, when people say, oh, well, we want Chinese characteristics on these things. It's like, okay, so you have European communism with Chinese characteristics, it's like, there may be some characteristics, but it's like, you say you don't want influence from the West, but the whole system is based on an idolatrous Western philosophy that the church should have rejected many years ago. And the serious problem in the church is that there are Christians that think that they can have part of their brain that says Jesus is true and the other part that says Karl Marx is true. Okay. And Jesus said, you can't hold another God side, first commandment, I'm the Lord your God, no other God beside me. Okay. You know, it's one thing to say, reject God and put another God in his place, and you're real clear about it. But when you want to practice Jesus and something else side by side, that's when it starts getting fuzzy, because you think you're okay and you're not okay. So to say that, well, I'm going to live by, you know, Jesus needs the teaching of Karl Marx in order to, you know, in order to make things clear for the church. No, the church doesn't need Karl Marx to understand the Great Commission or to understand that Jesus is the creator, sustainer of and the consummator of the entire universe. We don't need Karl Marx to explain that to us. Jesus is Lord of all, long before Karl Marx was born, long after Karl Marx died, and living the worldview, the naturalistic, materialistic, which ends up being hedonistic worldview that has come to the world, and you know, first through Soviet Russia, then through China, then through Cuba, then through North Korea, that all of that unfolded, and it unfolded dramatically and quickly in those nations. But the nation that had that was founded on the idea that there is a God, and it's God that gives us the right to life, the right to liberty, the right to pursue happiness, that nation has resisted for 150 years the idolatry that says that God doesn't exist and the government's the final authority in your life, and that nation has incrementally moved away, policy after policy, principle after principle, chipping it away to where in this election, what's on the ballot is not Donald Trump and Joe Biden. It's a matter of whether America is going to say God exists, and we will try to establish a just society on that idea that God exists, and he's going to hold us all accountable, especially the government, government elected officials, or the idea that God doesn't exist. Those are the two things that are on the ballot.
Well, it's just like you said, whatever 10 questions I'm asking, you come back with the 9.
You asked me 10 questions. The answer to 9 of them are biblical worldview.
Yeah.
Because, you know, a worldview is like a set of glasses. If these glasses were green and I put them on, I would see everything green. If they were blue and I put them on, I'd see everything blue. Right. If these are communist and I put them on, I see everything communist. If they're Christian, I put them on, I see everything Christian. The problem is not with the trees and the lamp and the computer and these things, the pens and the paper here. The matter is when I got the glasses on, how am I seeing them? Look at the glasses, look at the assumptions, look at the worldview, because it's through the worldview that people make decisions every day.
So by closing, you know, we want to appreciate, thank you for all these 20 years of your service and mission.
Thank you for your love and friendship all these years, Jane.
And we're going to give you just 1 minute to say to our audience and Christian friends, what you would tell them?
Well, there are 9 things, 9 answers to 10 questions, or the same answer. So what I would there. One young Christian man told me, he said, "This is the age of the fearless and the fearful." that there are many people who are afraid, and there are other people that are maybe recklessly bold. But never, ever, ever forget who you are and to whom you belong. You know, you as a human being, male and female, regardless of your race, regardless of your age, regardless of where you are economically, you are made in the image and likeness of God. And then God, from his hand, has given you the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that the gifts and the skills and the passions that God has given you. He has given them to you for the purpose of bringing them under his lordship. And your work should be a glory to God every day of your life. And that do not allow the fearful things that are around us today to bring you to despair. As a few theologians have said that, sin means to miss the mark. That's one of the words in the New Testament, that if you and I despair, that means that we have missed the mark. We've sinned. There's no room in the life of a Christian to have despair, but there's also no room in the life of a Christian to, in a very uncharitable way, be so bold to be reckless. So if you're among the bold, be bold. Use the gifts that God's given you. Bring them under the lordship of Christ. Live every day for Christ, moment by moment, because he is the creator and the sustainer and the consummator of and redeemer of the universe. And if you're leaning toward the fearful, take the courage that the apostles had in the resurrection of Christ, because Christ is raised from the dead, okay? That he raised himself from the dead, that it doesn't matter if right now we're in God's hand, okay, and our heart is beating, and if our heart stops beating, we're in the other hand of God. He hasn't moved and we have not moved. So I want to encourage you, do not be full of fear, be bold, but do not be fearless and reckless. You need to live your life in a way under the lordship of Christ that brings him glory, that demonstrates his love, his passion, and his concern for the dignity of every human being, whether they agree with you or whether they don't agree with you. But whatever you do, live your life out with the lordship of Christ, with a biblical worldview.
Well, thank you very much, and appreciate, and would love to have another chance to have you come back and maybe get some questions from the audience. So
that would be great.
Yeah. So thank you very much for this time.
Okay. Thank you. Take care. God bless.
Okay. Thank you.